sort of kind of unique sewing room items. And unique to me, maybe not be unique to you. One of them is a clean ironing board cover. And a clean ironing board cover to me is quite important because if there are markings, if you've got pencil markings or pen markings or chalk markings or just dirt and grime on your ironing board cover, that is going to transfer to your fabric. You will end up with that very same thing superimposed onto your fabric, and that's not what you want. So while it may seem like an unnecessary expense, it's only unnecessary if all it does is just sit there and not perform. I use my ironing board almost every day. If I sew, I use my ironing board. So it has to stay clean and it has to be functional to me. The second item that I find to be very important, and it may be unique and it may not be unique, is a shelf with hooks. So right here I have hooks. I don't have enough. It's been 2 weeks that I've been telling myself I have got to put some more hooks in, and I may do that today. I'm not real sure where they are, so I'll have to try to scrounge those up to apply them. I need like another one here, which is over here, and then I need a couple more over there. They're just an invaluable tool for me in here. A lot of sewing notions are storable in this way. I mean, not that I would, but as you could see, I could thread some, some floss into the little hole here, and I could hang it on a hook. And then I have access to it whenever I need it. The third thing is 2 types of starch. And the reason I say 2 types, one is a heavy starch, and that will provide almost a stabilizer effect to your fabric. So if you've got really thin fabric that will accept starch, and generally speaking that's going to be a cotton polyester blend or a cotton or a linen or a silk, all natural fibers will accept it. There are a few polyester 100% like spandex, nylon type fabrics that will not really change in a positive way if you use starch. But for the most part, your natural fibers and cotton poly blend will accept starch and react favorably if used properly. The best way to use a spray starch is apply it to your fabric and then just let it sit and kind of absorb into the fabric fiber before you apply heat. If you spray it and then hit it with heat, you'll often see almost like a dandruff looking white flake, and you don't want that. That's just the starch being kind of scorched off of your fabric, and your fabric doesn't benefit from it at all. So spray it on there and then give it a little while, let it sit. It will soak into the fibers, and then when you press it, you have, like I mentioned earlier, almost a stabilizer effect. It's like having something there to kind of help stabilize your fabric. When I was we would go to visit my grandparents. Both sets lived in Hickory, North Carolina. My gosh, I think the last time I was in Hickory was in the early 1980s. I don't know, it's been so long since I've been there now. I don't know if it is still the same charming, beautiful, quiet little town that it was when I was growing up. But back then, we could go from one grandmother's house to the other grandmother's house in one day and have plenty of time to visit both of them. But what I was going to say is we would go and we would spend all weekend, and we would go to church on Sunday at their church, which was Bethany Lutheran Church in Hickory, North Carolina. And my grandmother would get up in the morning and she would spray all of our clothes with starch. And then she would carefully roll them up, put them in plastic bags, mainly like, from the grocery store or something, and then pop those in the big freezer. Then, while we were still in our pajamas, she would make breakfast, big grandma breakfast, right? Then after breakfast, while we cleaned the kitchen, because that was our job, she would take all those clothes out of the freezer and press them. And I mean, it was like walking in cardboard because the starch would have been in the fabric for so long. The other starch is just kind of a lightweight, kind of helps pull the wrinkles out and has a lovely scent. And for me, my personal favorite is Best Press, Mary Ellen's Best Press. I can't tell you what is in that product. I have looked, apparently I'm not the only one who has done a search, and there's just no information about what it is that is in Best Press. And the next thing is a box full of sewing machine needles. So for example, here is a pack of Schmetz Universal. They're 8012s. The next, after the box full of sewing machine needles, is thread of different types. Thread, there is just an endless selection of thread weights, thread types, mercerized, 100% cotton, 100% silk. The thicknesses can be different. A lot of people have threads that they absolutely swear by, and a lot of people are still struggling to find their perfect thread. Some people won't sew with anything but polyester. The threads will cause a great deal of lint in your sewing machine, or they won't. So there are threads. Once you start looking at the world of thread, it will amaze you that there really is a place for so many different types and styles and twists of thread. So today I found a box online on Amazon of Gutermann thread. I think it was either 6 or 9 different types, or not different types, but different colors. It's great to have on hand, as many colors that you possibly can have. I like to have some heavy duty, like upholstery thread on hand, all the way down to very fine 50 weight cotton. The next is sharp scissors and rotary cutting blades, and you need to have either a pinking rotary blade or pinking shears, or ideally both. I can't say that they're a requirement because they're not. It's just that your life will be made so much better for having those two things. But the number one thing about your scissors is they must be sharp. And if you can find a pair of scissors that will cut all the way from here to here, you're doing great. This right here is Kai. They're 52/30s, so from here to here is 8.5. The blade is actually 4, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So the cutting surface is 4 inches. I am just amazed at the quality. These are from Japan. I want to show you, first of all, you want to make sure that the scissors you have can cut multiple layers of fabric, and the finer the fabric, the better. Because typically what happens with really fine fabric is that this blade, the top blade, will push the fabric over this blade and it will skip. So you'll end up with this weird thing where the fabric just falls off of this sharp surface right here and just ends up kind of caught between the blades. So if you can test your scissors on, you know, like 3 or 4 layers of silky polyester or something, and they cut, then you know you're doing pretty well. But the other test is just go one long cut that way, and then make sure that this is sharp. So all the way just to the very tiniest little tip. And if they cut, which these did, then you've got a really good pair of scissors. Now I have old used up Gingers. These are Gingers. They may still, yeah, I think they will. The difference is I really have to push. I know that it's hard to show the exertion in a video, but there is a stick right here where it just sticks, whereas these are just as smooth as silk. Okay, so I'll still use these for cutting fabric. They've not been demoted to paper yet. These I ordered. They were so cheap. They came highly recommended. They're called Mr. Pen, P-E-N. See if I can get that to show up. Okay, right there, Mr. Pen with the mustache. This is my folded up fabric. And when I get to here, I literally have to use 2 hands. And then that's what I was talking about, where it just falls off of that blade and it doesn't cut. I have to, you know, open my scissors and then continue. Most scissors are sharp down here. It's this part right here where they tend to kind of get, and that might be the second time I've used them. Seriously, I've had them about a week. Okay. These were a very nice pair of scissors. They weren't expensive. They're called Scissor Tail. Don't know if you can see it. They were really, really nice for a time, but they fell apart all of the time. My husband finally put some Loctite on one of these because this whole system right here would just come apart. And they will cut paper from here to here, from here to here. But they will not cut fabric any longer on the very, very tip of this blade. So I just save them for paper. Then I have my second favorite pair of scissors. So I have these. the Kai, and then I have these blue snail pinking shears. Now, one thing about these that you need to remember, and I often forget, is you have to keep this clean. And I do, I mean, see that lint right there? That just came off of this spot right here. That's a lot of lint off of a pair of scissors. So I do try to keep these brushed out all the way. And often when you buy a brand new pair, you will see when you first start using them, there'll be oil right in here. I do recommend that you use them first on scrap fabric. You don't want to start right out the gate using these on your good fabric, because this in here will definitely have some oil. But they don't, pinking shears don't generally cut through a whole lot of fabric, and I don't want to stress these out. I will cut 2 layers, and they cut all the way to the tip. And then you want to make sure when you're cutting that you line this back up where you stopped, so that you have a similar pattern all the way across, all the way down. And it doesn't take a lot to realign. And then there is the rotary blade, and they're just sharp blades. This is a 45 millimeter, and today I ordered a pinking blade to go with it. And I also want to keep this sharp. I will never use this on a piece of paper until, you know, it comes time to replace this blade. And you need to dispose of these blades very carefully. And again, keep lint and debris out of this area. So I just use a brush. I don't want to take the blade off unless I have to, because it just raises the risk of being hurt. But just, you know, brush and then extend, and then behind this area right here where your blade has extended out, you can take your cleaning brush and you'll be able to kind of pull some of that lint away. And then when you close your blade, sometimes you'll see a little bit of lint right along this edge up here. So you can clean that out as well. Okay, so that is the other, well, not so unique, but you know, sometimes people take scissors for granted, and they do provide different things. For people who do quilting, you know, they're going to find a different reason for having different sizes of scissors. And then of course there are also little needle work scissors, the very tiny, small, super sharp scissors that you use when you're doing cross stitch or embroidery or any type of handwork. You don't want to be lugging around, you know, these big scissors for that. And then the final thing that I have on my list, but not the final thing for sure, would be marking pens or pencils or chalk. And the whole range of those is huge. You have air erase pens, which you would use for example, if I'm doing heirloom sewing and I'm just doing a little bit, say I'm going to do a Madeira hem and I'm just doing a small, like 2 scallops worth, say a pen stitch. I'm not going to mark the whole thing anyway. I'm just going to mark a couple spots, do those, and then mark again. There's always a reason to need an air erase pen, and I never have one when I need them, and it's something I need to be more mindful of. We don't have these expensive fabrics just to ruin them with our marking. And lead pencil, while it might be a good substitute for someone who is quilting, doesn't really work well for someone who's doing heirloom sewing. It just doesn't. Then we also have all the way up to the friction pen. Friction pens were not designed for fabric, but they work well in some cases. The ink is never completely gone because it is bonded with a gel ink. So you do have the thermo responsive ink, but it's bonded to a gel ink. And if you mark on your fabric and then you use the heat to erase it, it might appear that that ink is gone. However, if you put your item in the freezer, you will see it slowly come back. So let's say that you're making someone an item that they're going to wear in the wintertime, and you've marked it and you've cut it out and you've stitched it together and you've erased all of the ink through the process of heat. They go out to go skiing or walking through a cold place in Colorado or Alaska, and all of a sudden they've got these weird shadow looking marks on their clothes. That is that ink that was bonded to the thermoresponsive ink, showing through. So that is something to keep in mind. It doesn't bother me that much, and I do tend to try to keep my markings on this outside within the seam allowance. So if I have a ½ inch of a seam allowance, I'm going to mark in just that ½ inch. I'm not going to be marking in the body of. But sometimes if you're making buttonholes or if you're marking where your buttons are going to go, you got that whole issue. So that's where I think chalk works the best. And chalk comes in many different forms. You have chalk pencils, you have Chalk-A-Pel, which is the little tube that you put loose chalk into, and then you can mark with that. A friction pen, if you've never seen one. Don't ever sign a check with one. Okay, so here is just a basic little chalk pencil with a little brush eraser. So there's the chalk, and this is about as good as you're going to get with a chalk eraser. It will just kind of fade a little bit and smear, but it will wash out. You will be able to remove this through the process of washing. This one has a light, oh, it's always so hard, a light yellow chalk on one end. This is broken, but it's a darker yellow. So this is a keyhole buttonhole right here, and that is what this is for right here. So I just have this little coaster that I made. I want to put that down, and I'm probably going to end up going through onto my sewing table, but it's kind of a rough and tumble surface anyway, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. So let's get you oriented. There we go. And I also don't have a hammer, but I do have right here. I'm really good at improvising. Okay, so you take your keyhole punch, which is what this particular piece of equipment is that comes with the Brother NS80E, and you put it down before you cut your buttonhole. You just set this in that little keyhole spot and punch, and you'll have a little hole there. And then the way I open up a buttonhole is I take my seam ripper and a pin. I'm going to go through here like that. And this applies for all of the buttonholes that I open. I don't do many other methods. This is pretty much the one that I use all the time. So I'm going to poke my seam ripper so that it goes all the way through the fabric, and then I'm just going to kind of wiggle it back and forth. It will cut through the fabric, and what happens here is the pin will stop it. I cannot go past where that pin is going through the fabric. It's been a few days. We had Mother's Day. All kinds of things were going on. In the meantime, I received a very sweet card from Quality Sewing and Vacuum in Everett. This is the sewing shop that has George, my Bernina. And it was very, very sweet. The handwritten note says, in beautiful script I might add, that the person who I worked with when I purchased the Brother sewing machine said that, "I hope your new machine helps achieve greater heights on your YouTube recordings. Kind regards," and then she signed her name. I thought that was so sweet. So I'll just keep that in here because so far, aside from my wonderful subscribers, that's the only thing I've received, the only outside you can do it. So I'm very pleased with that, very grateful as well. All right, in the meantime, I don't remember in all of the craziness if I showed you this adorable fabric that I purchased for the bed that I'm going to make from this pattern for the kitty cat that we have. It's not our cat, it's our daughter and our son-in-law have a cat named Apu, and I did not want to use Smitten Kitten for our male grand fur kitty cat baby. I just felt like something a little bit different would be more appropriate. So this is a yard of that fabric. This is just the cutest. It's nice, soft, I believe Andover. Yes, an Andover print. It's called Tarot Can Art. There we go. Really cute. Okay. As you know, I have already finished this mat, which will be going to Alabama for the farm dogs. The kitty cat mat that's going down to Oregon for Abby and Tori. And this is the one that I had to finish by hand around the edges, and this will be used in my house for Bam Bam and Harley. This is also the mat, the catalyst for me to go ahead and say, yes, I have to have another sewing machine. Because in all honesty, I felt like that was just a little bit decadent. But when you have to wait over, I think almost a month, I feel like I don't remember exactly when I took George in, but you know, I'm not going to receive George back until the 17th. Hopefully it will be on the 17th and not beyond the 17th. This is upside down, but my point is, without this particular mat, I would not have this particular sewing machine right here. And by the way, I have decided to go with a name that was proposed by my daughter and son-in-law who live in Western Washington in Edmonds. So I have George, my Bernina. This one is named Brother Louie. And if you've not seen the video or heard the song Brother Louie, you might want to give that a go. But I mean, being a brother sewing machine and a brother to George, it's perfect. I think they've chosen wisely. So Brother Louie it is. I don't know if I'll always call it Brother Louie. I may just call it Louie. I think it's kind of cute. Okay, so this I'm going to go ahead and put in the kitchen on the floor under their water bowl. That's where we are at the moment, and the sun is shining, and I have a tree in my backyard that needs a little bit of attention. So while the sun is shining, I think I may go and attempt to work on it. I did get the one in the front yard. I'll see if I can focus on it. It was all the way to the ground. It looked like Cousin It or a mushroom. Seriously, it was out of control. And it needed to be lifted, so I lifted it up off the ground without giving it a bowl cut. I don't care for that look where they're just perfectly straight all the way around. And I've got one in the backyard that I've got to do the exact same thing to. It's not as big as this one, but it will be one of these days. So that needs to be taken care of. And I need to do it now while I feel like I have the strength and ability to do that. So I'll go ahead and take care of it. Which means that this is the end of this particular video. I do have some other fabrics and notions and requirement type items arriving this week. When those arrive, we'll have a grand time opening those packages. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so. We would love to have you. Thanks again. Bye.